guys. Welcome back to the Left of Str8 Show Interviews, the premier podcast that shares the stories of our amazing LGBTQ community and, of course, fantastic straight allies, all from entertainment, foodies, books, music, and advocacy. I'm your host, as always, Scott Fullerton, and let's start talking. Well, hello there. Today I am back, and I have a special guest with me in studio. Joshua Pangborn's here. I was lucky enough to interview Joshua with my good old buddy Johnny in our Bears of a Certain Age podcast a few months back, and I'm excited to get him one-on-one to talk about his amazing work in a multitude of genres. Joshua's a creative powerhouse who's made his mark in the world of queer, fat-positive storytelling, and as the founder of Sidekick Productions, Josh has been dedicated to amplifying voices within our LGBTQ community, all through the unique blend of horror and comedy. From creating hit shows like Skeleton Crew and Demon Doctor, to publishing his first book, Homophobia, as a queer horror short story collection, Joshua's here to share his insights on body positivity, creativity, and the journey of just being a queer storyteller. We're going to dive into all that in just a minute, but first, take a look.
Well, bless my soul, it's a lawman.
Sorry to bother you. I'm afraid there's been a murder in the building.
As police scramble to identify the latest victim in a string of serial murders, there remain no leads to the identity of the killer dubbed the Brooklyn Butcher.
Killer on the loose, how ridiculous.
My friends warned me not to go out tonight. They say I might be meeting with the Brooklyn Butcher and not even knowing it.
They are out there and they could be anybody!
Do you think I'm the Brooklyn Butcher?
Goodness, was that perfect timing or what?
I'll say. Come in, we've been expecting you. You don't know what's gonna happen. What if you may wind up being dead?
None of us saw it coming.
That's what I said.
Hope you won't have to use the handcuffs.
Or maybe I do.
Let the games begin then.
What causes the Brooklyn Butcher to kill? Well, that's difficult to say. Every murderer has a different motive. There's revenge, rage, lust, power. But what it really all comes down to is fear. We kill because we are afraid. And most of the time, that fear causes us to do something we will always regret for the rest of our lives.
You opened my eyes to a whole new world.
Alrighty, guys, we are back with some of the multi-layered, so fun productions of my special guest today, Joshua Pangborn. Joshua, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Like I said, Johnny and I were lucky to have you together on Bears of a Certain Age, but we're not that kinky, so we try to have you separately when we get together on things. So I'm having you on by yourself, or you were great on Johnny's show a couple months back as well. But you have so many great things going on, from your production to this brand new book you have off. So I appreciate you taking the time. How's everything in beautiful New York City?
It is still too warm. I would like it to be cooler, but hey, that's because I like the winter, and thankfully we're close by. But other than that, New York is doing great. So I'm very happy to be in New York as always. So
I hear you. 83 degrees today in Northeast Ohio, right on the PA border. So I hear you. I'm feeling it.
Actually, the exact same thing in New York right now. So
I'm still running the air conditioner in the car for now. So yeah. Well, I'm excited. I did get a little background from you when we were on Bears, but remind my listeners, talk about where you grew up and what kind of a kid were you?
Sure. I grew up about an hour south of Montreal, Canada. I grew up on the Canadian border on the U.S. side. It's a very small town, about 45 minutes from Lake Placid, New York. So if you know where the 1980 Winter Olympics were, then you know where I grew up 45 minutes away from. So it's a very, very small town. It's about 500 people. My high school was comprised of about 600 people from the 9 neighboring towns. So it was a very classic rural mountain town that I grew up in, because I grew up in the Adirondack Mountains, which is one of the largest mountains and national parks of the United States of America. So lots of trees.
When were you an outgoing kid there? I mean, you're meeting all these people from all over. They're coming to the school. Are you outgoing? A little shy? What kind of personality did you have growing up?
I did a lot of clubs. I was in pretty much every club that you could have that wasn't a sport. But I was in the drama club. I mean, that was my primary thing that I did, and I was a drama nerd. So shocking, I know, seems strange, but uh, I did every play and musical that we offered, and so that I was I outgoing. I don't know if people would classify me as outgoing. I certainly was not shy, I guess. So I am what I like to call an ambivert, which is what other people call it as well. But somebody who can have traits of an extrovert, but is also an introvert. So it's an interesting combination thereof. So I am. That's a lot of information to answer your question of was I shy or not. But
I think we're kindred spirits that way. I'm very shy and introverted. I want to go to the party, but then I don't want to talk to. I'll just people watch the entire
or
time.
I just want them to come and talk to me, so that way I'm not bothering them.
There you go.
If I go and talk to somebody, I'm worried that they don't want to talk to me. But if they come to me, that I know they want to talk to me, and I'm like, cool, then okay, I'm going to talk to you and talk your ear off. But if
There you go.
I don't know you want to talk to me, I'm like, I can make it work, but I also am worrying the whole time that you don't want to talk to me. So.
Very, very similar, my friend. And talk to me. I always like to ask first time guests, when did you start finding your tribe, or where did you find your tribe? Were you able to start to find it in the theater community back home, or was it when you went to New York? Talk
It
about
was it was really hard growing up as it was so difficult growing up as a child in the upstate New York region as a little queer kid. I know and I'm not getting all drama and dramatic like that and everything, but I mean. I wasn't terribly open about my queer identity. A few people knew, but not a lot of. I mean, I'm sure a lot more people suspected than I believed at the time because they always suspect. Everyone suspects.
that. Right.
Everyone knows. They always know. But I didn't really feel like I had people I could connect with overall. I mean, there weren't a lot of people that I was able to reach out to and be the real authentic me and find my voice and everything. So when I went to college in the New York City region, about half an hour north of New York City,
Oh,
and I started to. From day one, I was open and queer, and I promised myself when I went to college that no matter what happened, I was going to start off with that identity firmly entrenched in who I am. So I did, and I started to meet people. But I don't know if I actually really started to find my voice until I was in my late 20s, to be honest with you. I found people that I connected with. I found people that I was friends with, but my tribe, if you as you said, probably not to my late 20s when I started. Probably when I started in Sidekick Productions is when I found people who gravitated towards me and knew wanted to do more of what I wanted to do and be who they wanted to be through what I wanted to be. So
right. Well, and talk about it. Like I said, you do such depth work in both horror and comedy. Were those two genres that you kind of fell in love with at school? Was there one, any certain project that kind of drew you to it, or talk about how the loves for those two genres came about?
well, I always loved horror just because I love horror. I mean that's that as a little kid, my very first my actually this is probably correct. My very first two DVDs I ever owned, one at the same time. I got them on my birthday with my first DVD player. The first DVD was Dogma by Kevin Smith, and the second DVD was Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton version. So a comedy and a horror film were my very first DVDs. So that's sort of that describes me. I mean, when you go to school, one of my majors was theater, and so the natural thing is to either gravitate towards drama or comedy, and because of how I looked and because of my identity, comedy was the more natural one that people pushed me towards and that they had me do, and so I guess that's sort of where I found it. I also found it easier to write comedy. I mean, everything I write is a little bit campy and a little bit queer, so that's sort of where the fun comes in there. But horror was never really something that any anybody in the classes will ever be like, yes, you should write horror, because nobody in college ever says that. That's not an option, really. It's comedy or drama. It's never horror, and I don't know why, because horror is such a wonderful genre to express yourself in, to find your identities in, and to be open and accepting of, because horror is a beloved genre of minorities for a reason, because you can find who you are in it, and you can find people who are like you who watch it. And so long story short, uh, I'm a very chatty person, so that's why all these long stories are very should be much shorter when I'm answering your questions. But but horror, but yeah, I mean, I grew up loving horror, but never knowing that I could make it, because it wasn't an option that you could do. I made comedy, and that's what I did at first. And I made a lot of comedy, and I tried to make drama, and my dramas were always funnier than I thought they were going to be. People loved them, but they were always like, "This is so funny," and I'm like, "It's supposed to be a serious drama. What are you talking about? You should be crying right now, not laughing." But
Oh, no.
okay,
I love
as
it.
long as you like it.
There you go. As long as you get the applause, I love
Right.
that. Well, and I mean, and like you said, horror's had such great coding, queer coding, and different coding for different communities that it's so great to work. And we'll talk about more of that with your book, I'm sure. Do you have any? Is comedy your subgenre? Do you have any subgenres of horror that you're really particularly drawn to? I mean, you have such great different types of shows that you've created, but was it the vampires, the zombie apocalypse? What were you? Anything that you kind of subgenre you were drawn to?
I think horror comedies are always fun to watch. I mean, those are always my comfort movies when I put them on. I mean, I mean, even a movie like Scream, I consider a horror comedy in many ways, because it is so funny. Scream is so funny. But So I'd say probably horror comedy is my comfort genre. I love body horror. Body horror is it's hard to make body horror, but I love it, and I hope to make it more of it someday. I dabble in body horror, but I don't have the money for body horror, and you need money for body horror. I love slashers, because I mean everyone loves a good slasher, but
Right.
I haven't made a slasher yet. But I haven't. Well, I have a script for a slasher that I just need to make, but I need time and money for that, because slashers and people, lots of people, because you need lots of people to kill in a slasher. So, um,
Nice.
but yeah, I love psychological horror. I love pretty much all horror. Every horror that they make. I'm not super big on sci-fi horror, because I'm not big on sci-fi and aliens. That's not really my shtick. But I love vampires. I love werewolves. I love zombies. I love all the monsters and the creatures. They're all fun, and everything about them is fun, and I enjoy original creatures. I enjoy classic creatures. So
There you go. And we talked about in the intro your experiences as doing very queer, very fat positive, very body positive. How does that? When did you kind of start to come into your own on that, and how did that start affecting your storytelling?
so when I left college, I started a theater company called the Living Room Theater Company, and I started that with my ex, who was not my ex at the time, but I started with my ex, and we did a couple plays, but there was no meaning to the company. There was no point to it other than we just wanted to make a theater company and have a name, so that way we could make shows. So when my ex became my ex, and we separated, I stopped for a little bit with making theater, and I just focused on my graduate studies. And because but then I missed it so much, I finally submitted something to a festival. I got in, so I had to produce it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna start a theater company, I guess, right now, because this is what the fates are telling me. And so I came up with the idea of calling it Sidekick Productions, and I wanted to make sure that it had more of a purpose. And so I thought about what I wanted to say with theater and film and television, and what I wanted to do with it. And I realized at that point, this was probably around when I'm 27. I realized what I wanted more than anything was um, tell stories about people who looked like me and people who were plus size. I use the term fat, but I know some people are not comfortable with that. But I wanted to tell stories about people who were not the typical ingenue, but could be an ingenue just looking like me, and that was important to me, and because no one else was doing that at the time. No one was really pushing it. Body positivity has become a bigger thing in film and television since then, but it's still not a mainstream thing for the most part. But that's sort of where it came from. I was tired of not having stories about fat queer characters, and I wanted to make that happen.
I love that. And like you said, I mean, lately we are seeing a lot more body positivity in a lot of different genres, a lot of different fields out there from anywhere from, I've had Coach Cub on before that's all about the traveling together and doing things like that. Um, but back then when you were starting out, did you have um, anyone in the genres you were watching that kind of inspired you, or do you have any heroes in filmmaking, or maybe just horror in general, filmmakers you kind of like their style and were trying to maybe emulate a little bit or learn from?
Well, at the time, one of the people that I saw doing things that didn't get inhibited by his body was Nick Frost. Nick Frost did a lot of movies where his body was not even taken into account. Like they didn't reference his weight or his body at all. He just played a part, and it happened to be that he was a larger person. Uh, um, Guillermo del Toro, of course, is a large director who makes um, beautiful horror work. I mean, it's just incredible. But at the same time, nobody's really making these movies. I mean, nobody is making a movie that's specifically featuring fat people, let alone fat queer people. But you still don't see it. So are there role models? Not really. I wish there were. I wish I could say yes to that and point to people. There are a few people that I'm sure I'm not thinking of right now at this second in my head, well, I mean, like Kathy Bates again. Kathy Bates is somebody who um, played some iconic roles in horror, as we all know and love from Misery. But again, it's few and far between, and wasn't done purposefully.
Well done. And talk about your own journey with that. Was it easy for you to get on film the first couple times? And what do you recommend to others? How do you get these? You've got an amazing crew of actors come on board with all shapes and sizes. How are they comfortable coming into it, or how do you get your cast and crew comfortable with all that?
That's So I was told basically that I would never be able to be an actor by my college professors. They were always saying that I should focus more on the behind the scenes stuff because I did not have what it took to be an actor, mostly because of how I look, but they had other thoughts as well. But that's another story. So I never really thought about being an actor after college. I thought it was impossible for someone who looked like me to be an actor. So I would focus on writing and directing and doing that stuff because that was still a way to participate and be part of the world that I loved. But then when I finished my doctorate, and I was like, I've got more time now, and I really would hate it if I never ever ever tried to act in New York City. I mean, I live in New York City. I have auditioned many people. I know what other people are like as actors. I've seen many actors in New York City. Um, I should at least try and see what happens. And I was very fortunate. I submitted myself for a short film, and I was cast in my very first short film. So the very first thing I auditioned for, I got. So people can't really say that. So I'm very lucky there, and I'm happy that that was my journey to start things off with. But when I got to Skeleton Crew, which was the big thing that we started with Sidekick Productions, this is when I wanted to shift from theater to film because I was a little tired of not having people come and watch because when you work in New York in theater and you're at the off Broadway level, all of your friends are also at the off Broadway level. And so everyone has a show that night and no one can come see your work. So I wanted to make a web series because I said, you know what? They have no excuse to watch it. They can watch it after their show is done. So, so we did Skeleton Crew, and I'm like, I'm going to act in it. I want to. I want to be an actor. I want to try it. I'm going to do it. Um, I think that Skeleton Crew season 1, Josh, is you see a lot of growth from season 1 to where I am now as a performer. Now I'm not to toot my own horn or anything, but now I'm an award-winning actor internationally. Then I probably wouldn't have been. But that's what growth and education is for, and you learn as you do blossom. Um, it was not hard, even though I was very shy about taking my shirt off at the beach and things like that at the time. But for whatever reason, I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. So I took my shirt off on camera and was like that was fine. And the more I did that, the more I embraced my body on film, the more I am able to embrace my body in life. And I've been very, very fortunate that I'm able to do that. And I've learned to love what I look like and love to not just what I look like, but to embrace it and even show it off in many ways. I mean, I wear things now I would have worn back then. Back then, it was like all like extra large T-shirts that didn't fit me because they were too big, covering and hanging down to my knees and everything. But now it's sort of like not, and I am so thankful that I didn't let the demons, or as RuPaul says, the inner saboteur, stop me from doing that and being on camera to grow in life as well. So as the actor, some of the actors in the shows that I work with are my friends, and I love working with people who are new to the field, because I think it's a chance to give them opportunities that no one else is going to give them. And again, I shouldn't say, I don't mean it like that, but I mean like it's very hard to break into this industry in any way, shape, or form, and sometimes you need to have a friend who says, "Hey, let's try it. Let's see what you can do." And I'm very lucky that I have friends who wanted to be with me and want to support me and believe in me, and will also do the ridiculous things I've asked them to do sometimes. One of the reasons why I am so often half nude in the things that I make is because I also want to show all the actors that I won't make them do anything I won't do too. So I want them to understand that I am not going to ask them of something of them that I won't do as well. Now, there are actors who have turned me down that I've auditioned once they understood what we do. That have said that they're not comfortable enough with their bodies to be in a fat positive piece. And this does. And they weren't even required to be shirtless or anything. They just weren't comfortable enough with their bodies to be around that world. And that's fine. I understand that. I mean, I was there at one point in my life too. I think we all have been. And I've had actors who say, I'm going to join you on this journey, but these are my limitations. And I'm like, perfect. Let's look at the script. If anything's past your limitations, let's adjust it. Let's adapt it. Let's fix it. I will never ask someone to do something they're not comfortable with, because you shouldn't do that, first of all. No one should ever do that. But so some of the actors I work with, I've auditioned from casting websites. Some of the actors I work with are friends, and some of them are people I've auditioned who have become friends. But it's all in all, it's been a beautiful journey of meeting and finding people for the Crewniverse, as we call it, and bringing them on board our wacky little journey that we are on.
That is so great. I mean, I've been the same way with my journey. I mean, I've been doing podcasting for 9 years. It took me 5 years to go on or 7 years to go on camera. So it's like I was very self-conscious, and as I kind of joked about before we got on air, I'm looking good from the chest up, and so it still takes me a little bit to aim that camera down a little bit. But it's like you said, it's just something that you don't want to hold yourself back, right? You feel like you're cheating yourself more than you're cheating anyone else, and it becomes a thing for that, right?
Absolutely, you so are. If you don't give yourself all the opportunities you can give yourself, then no one else is going to give them to you. One of the reasons I do what I do is because I don't want anyone to ever tell me I can't do something. And if no one else will let me do it, I will do it myself, and I'll make sure other people can do it themselves too.
Well said. Well, we'll get into the book here in a second. Let's finish up. Talk about Sidekick Productions in general. How did the name come to be? How did the production company come to be? You got these great series that we've talked about, Skeleton Crew and Demon Doctor. So much fun, so much sexy, everything involved. Independent filmmaking's not easy. I think we talked about on Bears. It's always a money game. It's a time crunch game when you have the day job and things. Talk about how the production company came about and how you're able to keep it afloat because you're working so hard and doing some great projects, my friend.
So Sidekick Productions, the name came about because I love Robin from Batman and Robin. He is my favorite character in comic books. So I was like, well, and I knew once I was going to tell stories about fat people and queer fat people specifically that I was going to take what's usually considered the sidekick of the film and television and theater in this world and put them into the spotlight. So I thought, you know what, we're going to call it Sidekick Productions because all the people that we're going to feature are often considered the sidekick characters, but instead they're going to be every character, and that's what they are. But it's produced by people like me who are usually considered the funny fat sidekick. So
I absolutely love that. Let's get into the book. I mean, the title alone is amazing. Homophobias, a queer horror short story collection. How long have you been doing the writing for these? Are these different ideas that came to you for productions that you've kind of turned into writings, or how are these stories come about? Tell me how you
so
got this collection.
Defeer, the editor of the book, Defeer Jackson, he came to me actually with the idea of doing a book because he worked with me for my film The Brooklyn Butcher, and he was an actor in that. He and I chatted a lot. We're friendly. We both love horror, and he said, you know what, you should really consider taking your stories and making them into a book until you can film them. And I said, well, I don't really know how to do all of that. I don't have really the bandwidth to learn how to self-publish because that's a whole other egg that I haven't cracked yet. And he said, well, you know what? I will help you. I will edit with you. I will be the editor for the book. And I said, okay, then, perfect. Let's do it. So I took some old ideas of scripts. I took some old ideas of short stories. I took some old ideas of things that were just up in my belfry, and I took them out and I wrote them down, and I said, you know what, these are the stories. And one of the things is most of these, if not all of these stories, are things that I will film someday. So this is a great way for me to get those stories out there, get feedback from folk about them before they watch any films, in a much cheaper way than making a movie about them first, and then voila, the stories came together. Defeer and I thought about what we wanted to make the stories about. What was the book going to be? So it was going to be obviously a horror book, but it was going to be about stories about love. That's what I tend to write a lot about is love, and not just romantic love, but familial love, friendship love, sex, which is a form of physical love. So the stories are all about love in some way, shape, or form. The quest for it, the loss of it, the need for it, and obviously the horrific twist that people go on as they either get it or don't. So that's sort of how it came about for that.
Did you write any news stories for it? Have you ever had an issue when, even if writing this book or in writing for your production company, you ever come up against writer's block, and how do you kind of work through that? And that's got to be scary when you've now committed to a book, but talk about how is the writing process for you? Is it relatively easy? Does it come hard?
So 7 of the 9 stories are completely brand new that I wrote in the past probably year, I would say. 7 of them are completely sorry, 6 of them are completely brand new stories. One of them is a story that I had started as a script that I took and adapted into a story. And then I later finished the script, but that's another story. And then 2 of them are stories that I'd written for for other books for publication. That the timeline on those has expired, so I was able to bring them into my collection as well. So I'm lucky that I've never really this is really awful to say because I don't want to sound braggadocious, but I've never really had writer's block. If I know what I'm going to write, it just comes out.
Nice.
So I don't usually ever sit down and just sort of stare at a blank piece of paper. If I'm writing something, it's because I know what the story is, and I get the ideas in my head, and they just formulate. And now sometimes I'm not happy with what comes out, but that's I think all of us that's true for
Edit,
any
edit,
writer. Yeah.
edit. Yeah.
Um, so with these stories in particular, some of them were very easy to write and have very little changes to them. Some of them were a little more challenging because what I wanted to write wasn't coming across the way I wanted it to. This is also my first time really writing a lot of prose in a very long time. I mean, I obviously did that in college. I did it in my college, my grad classes for my fiction writing workshops and all. But it's been a very long time since I've written significant amount of prose because most of the time I'm writing dialogue and scripts because that's what I do now. So. Um, so the stories were not necessarily the ideas were there, the plot was there, but the stories were not conveying the plot that I wanted to convey necessarily. So thankfully, Jafir was there to guide and suggest and point out what was not working. And one story in particular was literally going through edits like the 2 days before the final publication and everything. So, but we got there, and I'm very happy with it now. So that's the most important thing.
That is great. Congratulations on all that. Do you tend to think when you start writing stories, these stories start coming to you, is it just very random what happens, or do you think in comedy first, or think in horror first, and kind of meld everything together, or how does that come to you?
I sometimes it's different with every story, I'd say probably. But for this collection, I think the majority of the stories were written because I had the idea for the twist first, or the surprise first, or the climax first. That's sort of once I got to the climax, I was like, okay, let's work backwards. And often that's what I find myself is I know the ending that I'm working towards. Now I need to write the rest of it to get there, and that doesn't mean the ending doesn't change by the time I get there again. Um, I don't ever want to. I've criticized one particular very very famous fantasy novel series by someone we don't really talk about a lot anymore in the community, but for having an ending that was written like 15 years before it was published and it never changed. And despite the fact that the books should have encouraged it to change because that's what happened. So I don't ever want to be that. So I might have an ending, but that doesn't mean the ending will stay the way it is. So
Gotcha. Oh, that makes sense. Well, we got to start wrapping it up, Joshua. Talk to me a little bit. I mean, we're airing this in spooky season. We're taping this. The book came out in mid-September or mid-September here.
September 13th.
Talk about you've had your first book signing and everything. Talk about what your expectations were going into this and what was realized at this first book signing. Any fun stories from the signing?
Sure. My expectation was that my friends would buy the book, and I don't know if that's actually true yet. I don't think most of my friends have bought the book, but that's okay because a lot of people who I didn't expect to buy the book did, and so a lot of people have bought the book, and they seem to be really enjoying it. People that I don't know are commenting on it on in Amazon and leaving reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and I'm like, this is pretty awesome actually that people are doing that. And the book signing was in front of a lot of people that I did not know. So. We this was a lovely collection by the Brooklyn Horror Society. They invited 9 authors to come do a short reading from their books and have signings and tables where they can sell their books and everything. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so I was nervous, very very nervous, and but I did my reading from one of the stories, and I heard the laughter and I heard the smile. I saw the. I didn't hear the smiles. I saw the smiles though. Their faces were not crocking or anything, but I saw the smiles. And people were really enjoying what I was reading. And then when we went out for the book signings and everything, people I didn't know at all just came up and said, "I loved what you were reading. I need to get this book. I love the cover of this book. I need to get this book. I love this." The idea of this book, I need to get this book. And so I sold more than half of the books that I brought with me, and all the people I didn't know. And that was so amazing to have that experience where people, I expected certain people to buy the book. I didn't expect complete strangers to be interested enough in it to get it. And it was really cool to see that.
Well, you're such a talent, my friend, and it's rising up the charts. I mean, it's already starting to break top 100 LGBT horrors, so congratulations on that. Do you have a copy of your book? Because I haven't got my copy yet.
I do have a copy. It's right here.
Look at that. Oh, I do love that cover. Tell me about the cover.
So the cover and the title will go hand in hand because I wanted everyone to get the book and know what it was. It's hard with a short story collection for people to know what is they're getting into. And so I wanted to call it Scream Queens, or I wanted to call it Queer for Fear. But unfortunately, Brian Fuller and Ryan Murphy took those titles already. So I had to think about how I could make sure that people knew it was a queer horror novel. So I thought Homophobia is queer horror, queer fear, basically. But I also wanted them to know that it was a fat story collection. So I wanted to make sure that the cover featured a person who was not was fat, basically, and erotic, basically, because it is a campy, sexy horror collection, and that is what you get here. I had this idea of me or someone who looked like me naked and being pawed at by demons and everything. So we took the photo. These are all actual people's hands. And Jafir was a master at graphic design. He took all the hands, made them look like demons, put them, photoshopped all the bodies of the other people out of it, and voila, we have this.
Gorgeous, my friend. Absolutely gorgeous. Well, Joshua Pangborn, thanks so much for coming on the Left of Str8 show. Thanks for coming part of spooky season with us. Remind everyone where they can find you with your excellent website, where they can find your amazing films, and find this brand new book.
Absolutely. You can find everything you want to find at sidekickproductions.org, or you can go to Instagram at Sidekick Productions, or Twitter at Sidekick Prod, or TikTok at Sidekick Productions, or go to youtube.com/Sidekick Productions. You're getting the idea now, I guess. The book Homophobia is available on Amazon, or if you want an autographed copy, you can DM me on any of the things that I just mentioned, and I can talk to you about for me to send you an autographed copy. We haven't figured out a home for them yet, but our two feature films, A Taste of Youth and The Brooklyn Butcher, are going to be eventually they'll find some forever home, probably streaming somewhere. I'm hoping some good news about that at some point after the festival circuit is done. So
nice. Congratulations on all that. Do you think you might do a mini book tour down the road here a little bit during spooky season?
I hope so. I'm pretty close to figuring out a couple places I might go for that. So yes, I'm actually talking to a couple other people about maybe joining forces and going on a tour together. So
fantastic. Joshua Pangborn, I'm such a fan. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to come on Left of Str8 show interviews. Absolutely amazing work, guys. You know how I always say, anytime we have a great artist on here, music or books, don't be a cheap ass. Buy the book. Don't go and stream it or anything. So get out there and get it. Joshua, thank you so much. Stay on the line for me. Guys, we're going to have a special 5 questions with Joshua next Tuesday, so be sure to look for that. We appreciate you tuning in every week to Left of Str8 show interviews. We will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website for contests and other news and information. See you next week.